Jaguars.com coverage from the NFL Scouting Combine continues. JP Shadrick with ESPN NFL Draft Analyst Jordan Reid. It's good to see you. Good morning to you. We're at Indy. We're on Radio Row. Appreciate the time. It's not quite the Super Bowl, but in the draft world, this is a big deal.
Yeah, it's like Christmas week for me, leading up to Christmas in April. So I'm excited to be here, excited to talk about the Jaguars.
All right, so it's a different feel for the Jaguars at 24th. Well, 25th, but they'll get the 24th selection after the Dolphins forfeit there. So, you know, it's a good place to be, obviously. But you kind of have to wait and see what happens ahead of you in the draft, see what's out there. You'll have needs, obviously the Jaguars do. But the perspective of a GM and an organization making a pick at 24, obviously much different than number one overall.
Yeah, it is. And this is an interesting spot for the Jaguars just because they haven't been here in a very long time. They're used to picking very early in the draft. But that's what happens when you get the quarterback right. With Trevor Lawrence, I thought he took that next step that he needed to. And I'm really excited to just see where this team goes from here, especially with Doug Peterson now at the helm, the offensive-minded head coach, a Super Bowl winning head coach. I think that's the type of culture that they needed to bring to Duval. So this is one of my favorite teams to talk about just because the young core is so exciting.
It is a fun offense with Doug pushing the buttons. Press Taylor's, offensive coordinator. They've got coaches around the quarterback, and then they got the quarterback involved in designing this thing out too, and then they put in all the pieces around it. And as it went on this year, I mean, it was just fun to see this offense grow and mature and work together as a unit. And then you saw it in December. Yeah, they're firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, especially with the weapons that they do have. I love some of the targets that they have, and getting Travis Etienne back, I think that was a big boost, not only as a rushing threat, but also just how unique and dynamic and versatile he is as a receiving threat too. So with Trevor, I think there's only room to go up with him just because now being in the second year with Doug, being comfortable in that system, I think he's only going to get better.
What did you like the most about Trevor's game this year, as a quarterback technically?
Yeah. I think it slowed down for him, and then just having the continuity in place of having a quarterback developer like Doug. Doug has proven that he's been able to develop guys in the past, and I think he used that same blueprint for Trevor. So things seemed to really slow down for him, especially as the year went along, and we saw it in the back half of the season and also in the first round of the playoffs.
You're a quarterback in college, of course, so you understand the process and what that takes week-to-week basis to get things done. We'll get to the Jaguars' needs coming up. So I'm curious, though, about the quarterback position this year. Jaguars are not in the marketplace for it, of course, but it is always the big storyline at the Combine. Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, really the top two names that you're hearing. What else is happening at quarterback near the top of the draft this year, and who should stand? I think Stroud could stand out in the testing here.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he's probably going to look the most natural as far as throwing the ball, but Will Levis and Anthony Richardson, I think the ball is going to explode out of those guys' hands. It's going to make you go, whoa, when you see those guys throw in person. So each guy has their own individual flaws, like any other year at quarterback. Bryce Young, you're going to hear about the size. We'll see what he does.
We already have, I think.
Yeah,
right?
You see stuff going around social media and just seeing how small he really is. But he's proven that he's a really good player, and he did it at the highest level in the best conference in college football, in the SEC. So there's going to be some give or take with all these guys. C.J. Stroud, he had the great finale against Georgia, and the big thing with him was, can he play outside of structure? Can he create and play what I like to call sandlot football? When things go wrong, can he make these offensive coordinators right? But with these other two guys, they're more so of projects with Levis and Richardson.
Yeah, the Stroud thing, I mean, the guy's pinpoint when he's standing back there and has nothing, but like you said, can he move around? And then Bryce Young has rallied that team from unbelievable circumstances at Auburn a couple years ago. That's just one instance of that. The leadership ability is certainly there. Let's get to the Jaguars now. We talked about the offense, but the defense is where I think you're going to see a lot of focus in this offseason, certainly in the draft process. I mean, Tyson Campbell played well at corner last year. They moved Darius Williams outside finally in the last month and a half, and he played better there. So there's some questions at corner, especially in the nickel spot. So is this a strong cornerback class coming out? And what do you feel the Jags, if they do that at 24, could land?
Yeah, I think that's probably the logical way for them to go right now. And just speaking on this cornerback class as a whole, there's no Sauce Gardner or Derek Stingley in it, but I think it's deeper than what we saw a year ago. You're going to see probably 5 or 6 go in the first round. I think that's how deep this group is. But for the Jaguars, I think it's definitely in play at 24. And I'll just go ahead and name a player, Brian Branch from Alabama. I'm a big fan of him. And, he's your classic nickel corner, safety. He can play free safety. There's so many different positions that he can play, and we've seen the Jaguars using those guys all over the place as far as the versatility in the back end. But I think he supplants so many different needs that you have on the back end. I think he can be a day one starter at nickel. I think you can play him at free safety, and then also you can play him at strong safety too. But just the culture that they're building, the physicality that he brings to the table, and then when you hear Nick Saban talk about him, his face just glows. And you haven't seen that from him since a player that played a similar position in Minkah Fitzpatrick.
And that's obviously the Jaguars and Trent Baalke and Doug Peterson love the versatility idea. They're doing that on the defensive line, moving guys in different spots. And maybe not as much on the back end, but if they have to, they would love the ability to go do that. If he can play multiple positions like you're saying, and certainly if he can play that for Nick Saban, who knows what he's looking at, that's a good sign. So who else could be in play? If it's not him, then if he's gone, let's say, who are some other 2-3 names that you would could pop out?
Keely Ringo from Georgia.
Yeah.
He's another that I think would fit what the Jaguars are trying to build right now. And the thing with Keely is that he was seen as a consensus top 10 to 15 guy coming into the year, but he did have some struggles throughout the season in spots. Ohio State, Georgia Tech, those were some games where he really did struggle. But Georgia was really asking him to play a little bit more man coverage than what he was comfortable with. But if he can get in a scheme that has some man principles as well as some zone principles like the Jaguars have shown, I think he's one name to keep an eye on.
And he had the game-sealing interception in the national championship game a couple years ago. All right, so tight ends, we'll see what happens with Evan Ingram. Sounds like things are progressing nicely at that position, which, okay, we'll see. We still need it's nice to have two tight ends, not just one, right?
Yeah.
So that's another position group. How does that stand in the draft this year overall?
There's a strong argument that can be made that it's the deepest of any position in this entire draft class. I think you can see as many as 6 or 7 go inside of the top 2 to 3 rounds, and that's something that we haven't seen in a very, very long time. But Darnell Washington from Georgia, I think he's one that would be a really good fit as far as a complement to Evan Ingram.
Dude, right?
Every bit of 6'7", probably 260 pounds. He may come in at even heavier than that, but he's what I like to call a +1 in the running game. He's basically an offensive tackle when he's out there on the field. He's just pummeling guys, putting them in the dirt. So you can use him right away in the running game. And then also he's such a key factor in the passing game too. They didn't really have to use him a whole bunch just because they had Brock Bowers, a player we'll be talking about a lot this time next year, probably going inside the top 10. So they didn't really need him a whole bunch in the passing game. But as far as a player that he reminds me of, Mercedes Lewis, who was a first-round pick of the Jaguars about 20 years ago. So I think that's a fair comparison for him. And then there's some other guys you can see go in that 2nd or 3rd round range. Tucker Kraft from South Dakota State, Luke Musgrave from Oregon State. Those are your more athletic types. Dalton Kincaid from Utah. He's another one that could be in play if they want to take one in the 1st round.
You said almost 20 years ago for Mercedes Lewis. Gosh,
long career.
It doesn't seem it is. He's still at it. And of course, the Green Bay Packers the last few years. All right, so defensive line, this could go a number of different ways. The Jaguars late in the season, in key moments, had some pass rushing issues. They couldn't get there in key spots when they would rush somebody and then get home for the big sack fumble or cause some disruption. But when they needed to just rush 4, they had some deficiency there. I don't know if it's getting more edge play because they've put a lot of equity into that over the last couple of years, free agency or draft. But where can you make hay in the draft there? Do you get more flexibility inside on the D-line? What are some strong areas in this draft?
Well, the interior defensive line class isn't necessarily strong. Jalen Carter, we'll see what happens with his situation, which is unfortunate. He's the player that you hear about a lot in the 1st round. Brian Bresee from Clemson, Mozzie Smith from Michigan. And then there's some other players, Keanu Benton from Wisconsin, another player that I like too. So the interior class isn't necessarily strong at the top, but there is some depth early, day 2, in that area. But edge rusher, you can close your eyes and play any, mini, miny, mo with these guys and pick one just because it's so deep from top to bottom.
Bresee's the guy who his sister unfortunately lost her battle with cancer at Clemson. The whole team rallied around that group. So, he's been through adversity personally.
Yes.
So football is just another side of this thing. What he's had to deal with the last couple of years, that tells you a lot about him off the field.
It does.
Too.
It tells you a lot about his football character, and then just the way Dabo Swinney talks about him just as a person. He talks about his leadership, his charisma, and then just how good of his family, how tight-knit of a family he had, and then him being such a highly ranked recruit coming in and then living up to the hype.
Jordan Reid with us, ESPN NFL Draft Analyst. This thing continues to grow. How many combines is this for you? I mean, you're fairly new at the ESPN world, right?
Yeah, so this is my second year at ESPN, but this is my fourth combine overall.
Okay. It's changed even in 4 years,
It has.
right?
Yeah, they changed the format in here.
Everything's different in here.
Everything's different. Everything's different.
I know you're excited for the testing that starts on Thursday.
Yeah.
And you'll be here throughout. So what do you like to watch when you're actually in the stadium over there?
Well, so I compare scouting kind of to buying a car. And you can see a car online, you see the exterior, and you can just get pictures of the interior. But the combine is where you learn the interior of the car. It's just different seeing it in person. You're like, okay, I'm convinced I like this car, and I want to go ahead and purchase and make an investment in that car. So we're at the process, or the point in the process of looking at the interior of the car. You're getting to know the players at the podium sessions, and then you're seeing them move around athletically too. So there's so many different things, the details and nuances of getting to know the player, but also seeing how they move around athletically.
It's been like that for a long time around here, and they've just continued to change it. Hopefully it stays in Indy.
I hope so
thing,
too.
Right?
I agree. I like how everything is within walking distance.
It's easy. Don't have to go outside. It could be snowing out. We wouldn't know. Right. Jordan, thanks for the time. Excited for your success, and thank you for taking the time today.
Absolutely.
Man.
Thank you guys as always. And like I said, you guys have a really promising young core, and I can't wait to see where they go from here.
Well, hopefully it's up. Hopefully it's further in the playoffs. Jordan Reid from ESPN at the NFL Scouting Combine.